Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed, and we're back talking, hanging out.
Here we are.
The mowing crew's behind us.
We changed our recording schedule, and
I think they changed theirs.
Their just to fit
schedule.
their schedule.
I think they're doing it on purpose at this point.
They're trolling us.
So if you're watching on YouTube, you get to see what's happening behind the windows. Behind us and the mowing crew. If you're just an audio listener and you didn't know we had it on YouTube, there you go.
There you go.
We have a separate playlist on our YouTube channel, Irving Bible Church. Just search that on YouTube, and you can check the Formed playlist. And
you want to see what we're wearing today?
Yeah. And I mean, the green couch is becoming famous at this point. At some point, we'll change out the green couch, and it's gonna
throw everything off.
Yeah, it's gonna make some people sad.
Yeah.
So back over the summer, we asked some questions, or we kind of just put a Google form out there and said, "Hey, what are some questions you have as far as the listeners that you would love for us to talk about on Formed?" And one of the questions was, how do we navigate our faith, basically like in our workplaces? Where like not everybody, I mean, us three, we get to walk in every day to a church, to where our faith is part of our job. But most of the people, or if not all the people listening to this, they're not walking into that. So today, that's what we're like. How do we navigate our faith in the midst of our workplace? And specifically, a place that is predominantly a secular workplace.
Yeah. It's a good thing that working at a church is so much easier, right? When it comes to we don't ever have any of the challenges.
No conflict, no tension.
We hold hands and sing Kumbaya all day long.
All the time.
Everybody's just smiling.
Happy. And,
Bless you. Good morning.
No, bless you.
I love it. What do you think, Sissy? Any first thoughts?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I would say is, there's this idea of the sacred secular divide. So I think this is a good perspective to come from in that that's actually a false dichotomy, because what we're saying there is that there are certain aspects, areas of our lives that are sacred. And so one might point to when I go to church, when I'm doing ministry, that's sacred, that's important to God. And then there are other areas of our lives, like what I do Monday through Friday, that is secular, that is not so significant to God, not relevant or irrelevant to God. And that's a false dichotomy. I think what we know from Scripture is that all of life is a gift from God, and all of life is to be lived for the glory of God. So I think that's a good perspective to come from when we talk about this. And then secondly, I think I would say that God has placed each of us where we are for a purpose. We talk a lot about what is your unique purpose to play. I think part of that is where we work, and where we spend most of our time is with our colleagues at work and doing whatever it is God has given us to do. And so God has placed us in those places, has put us in those places for a specific purpose. And that's not a mistake, that He has a unique purpose for us there. And then I think the question we ought to ask is, now, how do I live on mission for Jesus where He's put me, right? And what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think we're going to do a session in a few weeks in our upcoming sermon series where we'll do a deep dive into a theology of work. So I won't completely unpack that here, but just the recognition that I think we begin to see the development of a theology of work, like on pages 1 and 2 of our Bibles, right? In Genesis 1 and 2, you actually get a vision of why God has made humanity to partner with God for the flourishing of His creation and His image bearers. And so you see human beings made to work, right, to partner with God in this way, even prior to the fall into sin. The work isn't just a consequence of the fall. It's part of God's good intention for His creation. So understanding, and I think having that sense of, okay, this is what work is all about, partnering with God for the flourishing of His creation and the good of His image bearers, and then being able to say, okay, even in the midst of all the challenges that I'm facing, the relational dynamics in my workplace, who am I helping, right? How am I contributing to the flourishing of other people or the flourishing of our community? the flourishing of creation, even if it's just I'm somehow contributing to the flourishing of my coworker, right? There's the sense of like my being here and playing my part on this team is for the good of my neighbors on this team. And so trying to have that lens that helps us see, how am I contributing to the good of other people? And then I think, along with that, kind of some of what we've talked about, even in recent episodes, we talked about that God works all things together for good, right? Romans 8:28. Part of the all things includes even the challenges in our workplace, even those relational tensions, those conflicts. God will use those things for our good, and the good, as we talked about, that He works from those things, is making us more like Jesus. So even when things are hard, when people are frustrating, trying to say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to do in me? Right? How are you using these circumstances? How are you using this adversity? How are you using this conflict to make me more like Jesus?
Good.
And when we can try to learn to adopt that mentality, it doesn't make all the hard things go away and all the frustrations. And so it's not like, as we said, you don't just call that bad stuff good, but you can say God will work good things even out of the challenges that I am enduring.
Yeah. So, Sissy, I think you probably answered this in the first question, but like kind of directly to someone that's listening right now that's really struggling going to work. They're going to work and they're like, man, I'm on fire for God. I love my relationship with Him, but it's just so draining for me to go to work in this environment to where maybe there's no other believers with them. And it's like, whether it's temptation, whether it's just frustrating and it's hard, what would you say to that person?
Couple things. So one, I would say, remember who you are, that you're the beloved son or daughter of God. Live out of that identity, and recognize that God is with you, right? So you have a good Father and He is with you. You're not alone. I think oftentimes you can feel lonely in a place like that, especially if you don't have other believers alongside you that can encourage you. And so I think recognizing that you're not alone, and then to rely on God's strength. I know that I often, my first thing is to rely on my own strength. I got this. I could do this, my own wisdom and my own resources. But really relying on God, recognizing that He is working all things for my good. There's something that God is doing in me and through me and for me, even in this difficult circumstance. How can I pay attention and grow aware of what He's doing? And then in what ways is this an opportunity to live on mission for God? How can God use me in this place? And that doesn't mean that you're going to start passing out tracts necessarily, right? So I think that's where we often get things twisted as well, and where it can, well-meaning intentions, it can go wrong. I think a lot of it, especially this is just my experience, what I've seen is that it's a lot about we need to use words and we need to share our faith. And so I'm not saying don't do that. We should do that. And yet a lot of it is around, people are not going to listen to what you say until they see the way of Jesus in what you do. Yeah. And our work is such a critical opportunity for us to show the way of Jesus. In how we do our work. Do we do our work with excellence? And by the way, this is not just for a secular environment. This would work. This applies to us in our setting as well. But do we do our work with excellence? Do we do our work with integrity? Do I deliver on what I say I'm going to do? Do I keep my word? Do I speak kindly to others, or do I gossip about others? I think there's such a temptation often to try to get ahead, and success and ambition, I don't think are ungodly things. I think there's a holy kind of ambition where we work for the glory of God. And yet there are times where we can think of just ourselves and how can I get ahead? How can I get the bigger bonus or the next promotion? And I think the way of Jesus is to say, how can I be helpful to others? Right? And how can I partner and collaborate and seek the good of others instead of myself? And I think those things matter, that when we work in that way, that points to the goodness of God, of what He's called us to do, the way of Jesus. And then there's that quote that's often attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, where preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. So he didn't actually say that. And I don't actually think that's true, but there is something
Points
to
to
say.
something really.
Did we just make up all of that?
Yeah.
I feel like Barry has been talking about this for a while.
But there is something.
but I always
to say
point out that we can't actually find it in St. Francis.
It's not
writing,
determined that he said it, but it's a good saying. And there is something to say that sometimes you have to begin with your actions. And what my personal experience has been, before I can talk about my faith, I've got to live it out. Because oftentimes what I've seen is those two don't line up. And that is very disheartening to people that are not following Jesus, because it just feels like, well, you say one thing and you're doing another. And then I do think there's an opportunity where you get to share your faith. And I think where we get caught up with that is we think we got to know all this theology and all this doctrine. If I don't have all the answers to every question, like I don't even want to say anything. And I think there are times where words are necessary. And one of the best ways to do that is to simply share your story of here's what Jesus has done in my life. So those are some of the things that I think I would say to somebody. I think the other thing I would say is you need to have Christian community that can encourage you and hold you accountable. Because I think what's easy, I take our church, for example, you can come in on a Sunday morning and be here for, the hour 20 for service. And if you're not actually sharing vulnerably with others, other believers, if you're not sharing your life and your struggles and here's what's going on at work, you have no one to encourage you in those difficult places. You have no one to hold you accountable to how are you living Monday through Friday. Yeah. And so I think that's important too.
That's good. Yeah, I think sometimes we talk about very spiritual practices sort of in the abstract.
Yeah.
I think it's really good to think about the concrete context of a work environment and what do these spiritual practices look like as applied to my work. So I think we've maybe mentioned before the idea of the praying of the serenity prayer. This is a beautiful prayer, oftentimes associated with 12-step recovery kind of programs. But the way the serenity prayer begins is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And boy, I think about that prayer, and then I think about the challenges that sometimes people face in the midst of their work. And that's a great way to apply that prayer to this context. There are things, God, in my work environment that I can't change. Grant me serenity to be able to accept those things. But there are things that I have agency over. That there are things that I can affect, that I can change. Give me the courage to change the things I can. And then the third aspect of that, give me the wisdom to know the difference, because that's where sometimes the challenge comes in, right? What do I have to surrender to God? And then what do I need to be actively engaged in trying to bring about change and improvement? And I think about that even in a couple of ways. The courage to change the things I can. Sometimes the courage to change the things I can is, how can I contribute to this being a better work environment? I mean, we've been talking a lot over the course of the last year here on our team about our staff culture. And there are things that those of us who are in sort of positions of leadership can do that impact the staff culture. But then there's things that everybody, right? The culture is how we all operate together. So how do I contribute, and how do I help all of us actually experience the kind of culture that we want, we long for? What is my part to play in that? How am I contributing? How am I detracting? So can I be a change agent within my work environment? Or sometimes the courage to change the things I can is to say, if it's become such that it's so disheartening, so overwhelming, that so discouraging, the courage to change the things I can may be that's actually stepping outside of that and saying, okay, Lord, where will you lead me from here to be able to find an environment that is where I can do the work that you've called me to do in an environment that's more life-giving than this one. And so I just think about that particular spiritual practice. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. And then, of course, as the prayer continues later, it talks about accepting hardships as the pathway to peace. And so that's, again, recognizing sometimes the very challenges that we face in the context of work can be part of what God is using in our lives to form and to shape us, to shape our character. And then one other spiritual practice that I thought about as it relates to navigating the complexities of work is Brother Lawrence and practicing the presence of God.
Good.
And how do I, in the midst of this environment and my day-to-day responsibilities, just how do I walk with God in the midst of this?
Yeah.
Brother Lawrence lived as a monk in a monastery, and they had times that they gathered together in the church to pray. And yet what he wanted to do is learn to practice the presence of God as much in his daily tasks of washing the dishes and making the meals as he did when they gathered together to prayer. And so he just cultivated this sense of what does it mean to just attend to the reality of the presence of God in this particular moment, in this mundane task. And I think there's something really powerful for all of us about thinking, what does it mean for me to practice the presence of God in the midst of all of the everyday, day-to-day tasks of my work?
Yeah, really good.
Barry's just quoting monks over here now.
Brother Lawrence, he pulled out Brother Lawrence.
Monks. Sissy, you talked about being in community, and this is kind of one of the things that I wanted to hit on is like the things that you can do outside of work to help you when you are at work.
Oh, that's good.
And you mentioned community. Maybe you could expand on that.
Yeah.
I was going to mention like maybe it means spending time with the Lord on the way to work, and it means sacrificing a podcast. I've went through seasons where like I love my sports podcast, but maybe in a certain season I'm in, I really need that worship and prayer time while I'm driving, eyes open. That it means not doing a sports podcast, or
not sacrificing the formed podcast, but a sports.
Not formed,
not formed. Worship formed, or even like during lunch too. Like I might. Instead of listening to something over lunch or going out with somebody, it's like, hey, I'm going to eat my lunch maybe by myself and listen to something that kind of refuels me again for that.
It's good.
Breaded afternoon shit.
Yeah, that's really good.
But do y'all have anything else to add or expand on about things outside of work you can do that helps you?
One of the things I still do now is every morning when I spend time with the Lord, one of the things I'm doing is I just pull up my calendar and I'm looking at my day to think about, and I'll pray through sort of my meetings and the people I'm meeting with. But I remember even when I have difficult meetings or I'm not sure how this one's going to go, or I know this is going to be a hard one. That's when I want to, Lord, I need your presence with me in this meeting. I need to be aware of your presence with me in this meeting. And Spirit, I need you to guide me in the words I'm saying. And how do I handle this in a way that's going to bring you glory and love that person well? And so praying through your day, even before you start, I think that's good. That's been a helpful practice to me. And the other practice for me that's really helpful is pausing at lunch. So, and it could just be 5 minutes. Like I was driving here and I did it when I went to lunch, and as I'm driving back, I'm thinking about the rest of my day. And so I'm thinking about the idea of consolation and desolation of where did I feel the Spirit's presence this morning? Where did I miss it? Because I'm too busy trying to do things on my own. And there were plenty of places where I missed it this morning. And Lord, help me as I go into my afternoon of the things I'm doing. How do I be aware of your presence with me?
Really good. Yeah, it's funny. Both of you mentioned the lunch hour. That oftentimes is that time for me where maybe I can only get 10 or 15 minutes in my car or something like that, where it's just that opportunity to be quiet, be still, not to be filled with noise and distraction, but just to be present to God and to myself. And that can be a really helpful, meaningful kind of reset in the middle of the day, is just taking some time to pause and be quiet. The other thing I would say that came to my mind is Steve Cuss has this idea of the life-giving list, and actually creating a list of what are those things that are life-giving to me. And they can be little things. And he talks about going out and taking his dog for a walk. Right. And one of them on his list, he talks about holding hands with his wife. So then if he gets to go for a walk, holding his wife's hand and walking the dog at the same time, he, get two things off the list. And so, but just actually having a list of things that can be life-giving to you. And the list helps you just to go back in that time when you have a moment, when you have an opportunity, and when you're just depleted of like, what can I do simply from my list that brings some life back into me?
Yeah, I was, I don't know, I started thinking about something else and now I lost track. No. Okay, so I know where I wanted to go. Okay, so if we're going to work in these environments and maybe you're a little bit more confident, but and like, hey, I need to be a light in my workplace, but also I don't want to like Jesus juke everything. I don't want to be at lunch and somebody's splitting their sandwich. You're like, hey, you know what else split? The Red Sea. And it's just like, you're trying to like do all like, you don't want to do these things.
Yeah.
But you also want to reflect Jesus at the same time. What is maybe God call us to be? And I know you talked about it earlier, whether it's secular environment or church environment, however, putting air quotes here for audio listeners. But how does our actions reflect that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just building relationships. And so sharing your life with other people. So you're at lunch with your colleagues. And I mean, for me, I was on the East Coast where going to church is not a normal thing. Like most people don't do that. And so if you say, hey, what are you doing on the weekend? Well, I'm doing this thing with our church, or I've got this thing going on. Well, what are you talking about? And so, people start hearing a little bit about your life and what you do outside and recognize, oh, you're a Christian. And at some point, and then they start hopefully seeing how your actions line up with what you're saying. For me, that happened a lot because there just were times where, you know what, I'm going to choose to not do this thing that I really want to do because it's going to make things better for me, but it's not the way of Jesus. And it might not even work out for me in the short term, but I'm going to trust that God's going to take care of me. So it might mean I feel like I'm not going to move ahead as far as I want to, as soon as I want to, because I'm choosing not to badmouth this person. Or I'm not just looking out for trying to advance my agenda, but I'm going to look out for this other person as well. And how can we collaborate together to move forward rather than saying, if I do this on my own, I'm going to look really good. And I've had times where people have asked me like, why would you do that? You did not need to do that. Why would you do that? And I get to share a little bit about, well, here's what I believe. Like, this is the way of Jesus. And then for me, a lot of it is just saying, can I just tell you, like, I'm not going to try to preach anything to you. I'm just going to tell you, this is what Jesus has done in my life. This is what we talk a lot about John 9. And I have like always used that because for me to say, here's what my life was like without Jesus. Here's what my life is like now. It's not perfect. I don't have everything I want. And yet I can tell you that I experienced this kind of joy that I didn't have before. People can't argue with your story. And the other part of that is, I think I've never seen, in my experience, I have never seen someone argued into belief. No. And I think a lot of times we resort to, well, let's go to apologetics. I think apologetics are really important. I'm not saying it's not. I think we should be able to defend our faith. And yet, I think we often tend to start with confrontation and arguments. And I'm not sure if that's always the best place to start.
That's good. Yeah, it's really good. I don't know. I mean, I think the parting of the sandwich in the Red Sea could work. Shows you what I know.
I haven't
actually worked in a secular environment.
What are you doing to the sandwiches?
That's right. No, I think, and you've alluded to the two big things that came to my mind already, Sissy, but I think actually doing your work well and being a person of integrity are actually really important. We can sort of underestimate the significance of that when it comes to the idea of evangelism or witness. And yet I think those two things are paramount. If we do our work really well and we consistently practice integrity, I think people will take notice.
Yep.
And then they get curious, right? They get interested, like why we are the way we are. Yeah. And this is what, Peter gets at in 1 Peter chapter 3, when he says, always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks for the reason for the hope that you have within you. And so part of what Peter is suggesting there is like, if you live in a distinctive kind of way, people are going to notice and they're going to ask you. And so rather than feeling like you've got to sort of, have an agenda and kind of push it on people in ways that can actually be pretty off-putting, that we should actually live in such a way that causes people to take notice and say, tell me about you and how'd you become the kind of person that you are, which opens up then the opportunity for us to share about the hope that we have through Christ.
Yeah. I had two things in this of I tried to over the past, or since we've been in Dallas these past 10 years, worked at Nike and then worked in the Mavericks media space, Maverick 7. So two things I try to live by was like, I don't try to like lead by my convictions, but I stand on them.
That's good.
And where I don't want to be known as that's the guy that's against blah, blah, blah. Now, I have worked somewhere before to where there was an event that they were going to do. And I was like, hey, I'm not going to work that event. I'm not going to wear this. I'm not going to work this. This is what this is standing for. But I want to work here. Yeah. And they almost respected me more because like they didn't know about it. But then I was like willing to like not work there because I'm going to stand on that conviction. The other thing is, if you ask somebody to describe you, how consistent is that with Jesus? And the thought of like, you don't know when like that seed is going to come. That's right. And bear fruit one day I'm sure we've probably had people, I've had different people or after I've left a job like a Nike or, in the media world or whatever, it's where people I barely knew, but when stuff happened in their life, whatever, like, hey, I know you're a believer. Can I talk through this with you? Like, I know we've never really had those conversations before, but I just need somebody to talk to. You just never know those types of relationships, what it could lead to in the future and all of that. If we could lean on some personal experience, Barry, when was the last time you worked in a place that was not like religious?
I've been a professional Christian for a long time, and that's got its own unique challenges to spiritual life, right? When you get paid to be a Christian in some sense, that actually can be challenging in its own right. But it's been a while since I've been in a work environment. That's part of what I wanted to say, even probably earlier in the episode than this, is like, I don't pretend to be an expert in this from my own sort of personal experience. Because I've been a seminary professor and a pastor for the last couple of decades, so it's been a while.
Yeah. Sissy, fancy New York days.
Fancy. There's nothing fancy about it. It was just New York. I mean, the thing that I often say to people is I feel like I have had more. People often think that you have to go into vocational ministry to do Jesus work, and I feel like that hasn't been my experience. That I've had more conversations about my faith in the non-Christian workspace than I have in pastoral ministry, because I think it's an opportunity to say, do you actually reflect what you say you believe? And I think if you walk the way of Jesus, wherever you are, whether you're in New York or Dallas or wherever it is, you're going to kind of stick out at times, right? Because you're just not going to you don't go with the flow. You're not doing what people would expect you to do because you're not trying to, it's not out of your own self-interest. You operate out of love for others and love for God. And that is a very different dynamic than most people would operate out of. And so it's such an opportunity to say, can I just tell you about Jesus? And I haven't really found people, I mean, I was in New York City. I've always found people to say, just tell me what you believe. I've never found people who are like, I don't want to hear about that. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but if you can have enough relationship with people, I think that they want to find out more about you. And so it's always just been a really positive experience. I think it's been a hard experience. I've had to make hard choices because I follow Jesus, and it costs me. And I sometimes on this side of eternity, I've not reaped the benefit of that, but I believe that in the end, God takes care of me.
Or you don't get invited to things, or you stop getting invited to things.
Yeah, you don't get invited to things, or like I missed out on this advancement opportunity because I decided I wasn't going to talk about this person the way they were talking about me, or you have to turn the other cheek like Jesus taught us, where, I'm going to honor you even though you're not honoring me. And I think that happens in lots of environments. And so how do we consistently do that? And for me, and this is still something I'm learning how to do, is how can I operate out of the love the Father has for me? Because if I really believe that I'm loved, and if I operate out of that, then I don't need anyone else's approval. All right. And that's been a huge thing for me of how do I really apply that to my life? Because if I did, then every time I have an insecurity or a fear or an anxiety, every time I think I'm missing out on something, I'd say, well, I'm the daughter of the King. Fine. Right. God's going to take care of me. So that's been my experience.
It's good.
Barry, what was your first job?
Oh, my first job. So I had a job as a scorekeeper for the city. So I kept score for softball games and volleyball matches. And then I worked at a property management company. I think I did talk about this on one episode where I had to go put eviction notices on people's door. That was a pleasant experience. Let me tell you.
They killed you in your 9-ness.
Yep. Oh yeah.
You don't really have to leave. Well, you do, but it's not my fault.
I'm not deciding. Okay, well, good conversation. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're on your way to work. It's some encouragement. Yeah. It's also a little bit of guidance too. Especially if maybe it's not a life-giving environment that you're going to. Yeah. At the end of each episode, we try to have some fun, have some banter. And so we have our staff retreat this week, an overnight staff retreat, which you never know what's going to go down at an overnight church staff.
It gets a little wild and crazy.
Yeah. We might be line dancing at 1 a.m. or something. But so in light of that, in light of traveling, this could be a plane, hotel, road trip. Do you have any quirks, travel retreat type of quirks about you?
So I know that I have a couple.
Oh no.
One that if my son was still around up behind the camera, he would definitely point it out. And I feel like maybe we talked about it once before, way earlier on an episode, but especially when my kids were little, they would get really frustrated with me at how uptight I get about being quiet when we're in a hotel, right? I just would be over the top about not stomping on the floors or being loud in the hallways. And the reason for that is the thing that annoys me the most is when people are loud in the hallways or stomping on the floors, in the room above. And so I'm trying to have that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And yet my family would just get so annoyed by me because I was over the top about it. So that's one. The other one would be, this is funny. We've talked a lot about candy on this podcast, and I love the candy hot tamales. Okay. But hot tamales I associate with travel. So I would never just go buy a, box of hot tamales. But whenever I travel, whether it's a road trip or a plane flight, I was flying back for Denver just this last weekend, and I was disappointed because I went in the little 7-Eleven in the Denver airport, and they didn't have any hot tamales. So I don't know why, but I just associate travel with hot tamales. So I'm always on the lookout.
Your travel candy.
There you go.
Yeah.
I have a purple Skittles. That's my road trip.
Really?
Purple Skittles.
I don't really do it for planes.
You can buy just purple?
No. The wild berry.
Oh, the purple package.
The purple package.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
That's my road trip.
Your road trip candy?
You Skittles here and there.
All right. I don't really do candy.
Peeps?
I'm not a candy person generally.
Road trip,
but just traveling.
Just traveling.
Peeps on the plane?
Traveling, I'm doing more
planes.
Chips. I want salty.
Planes and Peeps.
Yeah. No Peeps. Peeps are only at Easter. Yeah, we don't bring them out otherwise. Not like your candy corn.
All right.
Mine is I am that person. I know how to navigate an airport. I travel a lot, and so I know, especially between DFW and Newark, I got it down. I know where to go, what's in each terminal, all of that. So, one of my things is when I'm on the plane, I am the first person up. Because I have no time to keep sitting on the plane. I laugh
at you people.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
She's that person.
Where are you going?
I have no time to sit here. Let's go.
Yeah.
You're just standing there.
And then, everyone's taking too long.
Are you tall enough to where your head hits the thing?
Well, I got to get out into the aisle. I'm already in the aisle. Yeah. If I could, I'd be up the aisle, but I'm not.
I just laugh at the people who stand up quick in the back and they're heads
no, I'm in the aisle.
I'm you're going to stand here for 15 minutes like this.
I'm at least going to get out first for my row.
Okay.
I know that's happening.
That's good.
Yeah. So I'm in the aisle. Same thing with TSA. I can't handle the people on security line. First of all, if you don't have TSA, you need to get TSA. I don't know why people don't have TSA. This is a whole thing. But then if you do, please learn how to navigate the line.
I could see her being pretty intense in an airport.
Airport sissy.
Airport sissy, I think, is a real thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had to figure out how to take off your belt and all of this. And
Come on, people.
I have 2 hotel ones. One, I don't walk barefoot in the hotel.
I don't either. I agree.
Anywhere in the hotel.
Yeah.
I have not encountered this before.
Oh yeah,
I will put
I don't socks or
my sandals.
Yeah, whatever. I agree.
But
then I'll take them off before I go into the bathroom of the hotel because I don't want
Well, I'll step on a towel. I'll put a towel
Okay,
down.
that's fair. Yeah, I would agree on you. Yeah.
Caroline's in the control room. She was with you, and then she was like, huh? No way.
And then my other one, the first thing I do in the hotel room is I clean the remote.
That's really good. I don't do
Interesting.
that, but I think that's good.
I saw something a long time ago
Yeah.
that's the
think it's
dirtiest
pretty
thing in the
nasty.
hotel that never gets like
Oh, wow.
Clean.
touched or cleaned.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I always like, because I always have hand sanitizer. I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm just like,
Just
Wipe it
slathering
down.
all over the
Yeah.
remote.
Yeah.
I think that's
Very
smart.
okay.
anyway, might be a weird quirk to some, but
Yeah.
I'm kind of a germ
it might
guy.
be a new weird quirk for me now that you've
I know.
told me about
You are a
it.
germ guy.
Yeah, but I'm not like insane over the top. I do wash my hands before at every restaurant I go to.
Yeah.
First thing I do, or I'll get up just go wash my hands. That's it.
That's good.
I don't know why. That's just anyway. All right, there you go. That's
There you
what
go.
y'all are all wondering about right now. Weird quirks about us.
Leave your quirks in the comments.
Yes, leave them in the comments. Also, Sissy's drink was covering the timer for me.
Oh no.
So if we went over on time, I'm sorry on that. Not really. We'll be back next week for another episode of Formed.